Hi, welcome to part 3 of our Flourish series. The Flourish Plus materials are designed to help you to dig a little deeper into the theme of flourishing, which we believe is a highly biblical topic. Today I'm with Kate, my first wife, and we're going to be talking about the whole idea of flourishing families. And we're basing a lot of these studies on the topic of the book of Proverbs and the wisdom that we get from the book of Proverbs. But I think, you started your thoughts about this from Psalm 1, and I think that's a great place for us to start. Why don't you talk to us about what flourishing families means to you?
Well, it's a great topic. I'm so glad we're talking about families in this context. And when I talk about families, I feel like I'm a dog with two tails. I don't really know where to start, and I've got so much to say. But I love that Psalm 1 is a perfect place to start about life and relationships, and of course the family as well. So let's read Psalm 1 together, the first part. Blessed is the one who does not walk in the step with the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates in his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. So that's Psalm 1, 1-3. And I love the beautiful natural pictures in the Bible, and that they can just overflow into all seasons and all generations, right up into where we are right now. And of course there is a stream that we all want to be planted by, and we don't start our families and our marriages and our friendships saying, this is going to be great, it'll be great for a while and then we'll fail. We just want to flourish in all seasons. And of course, coming out of COVID-19, we've just been through an amazing season, and we've seen what flourishes in our lives and what doesn't. Really good time to be talking about relationships, isn't it? So you know what? Sometimes it's good to start with, well, what isn't a flourishing family? Well, a flourishing family is not a perfect family, all right? About 5 years ago, Bruce and I went out to have a beautiful Mother's Day lunch at the most expensive place in the Hunter Valley with all of our loved ones. And we had the biggest fight we've ever had in our whole family's history.
It was their fault.
It was all, I don't know whose fault it was, but it wasn't mine. But it was my Mother's Day. But out of that time, we created pathways of health that would never have come unless we had that horrible lunch. So it's not a perfect family. And you know what? It's not a lucky family. Okay? So, you see people and good things have happened and they're like, oh, you're so lucky. Luck has very little to do with it. It's like saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get. It's not that at all. And it's not like the more perfect I become, the better my family is. It's the grace of God. And for every season that we have, especially in family life, there is a grace for that. And I'm very, very grateful for that. So it's not perfection and it's not luck. So what is it? Let's look a bit deeper. Do you know, the family is the bedrock of society, and there's great threats against the family. So now even more than ever, we need to stand firm, and we need to be learners of how to do family well. And we need to be able to also pass on that knowledge and the goodness that we've seen. And the Bible says that one generation tells the next of the glories of God, and that's our privilege, that's our duty and responsibility. But it's not always easy, is it?
No, it wasn't my fault.
It wasn't your fault. So, I love the images in the Bible about rural images. And coming from the Maitland campus, we know all about, we need the rain and we need the dams and we need the crops. And so Jesus has these beautiful images of life, and the agrarian life at that. So let's look at another beautiful scripture. I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So that to me speaks of the grace of God,
Yeah.
which we have access to as followers of Christ. And we have great need for, especially in our relationships. But I love in verse 2 in that scripture, it actually says that a branch that bears fruit is pruned. So there's no shame in being pruned, and it's not punishment to be pruned. And in a family, what I love about the family, it's a great hotbed of growth, personal growth, maturity, authenticity. And when you bear fruit, don't be discouraged if you are pruned, because it's in the heart of God that we actually do flourish in our family relationships and our friendships.
So I want to pick up on a couple of those thoughts. I mean, you speak about the whole thing of not feeling qualified. My favourite illustration of that, as you probably know, is the guy being wheeled into an operating theatre and he's there lying on the stretcher, and the anaesthetist is attaching him, to all these cables and so on. And just before he dozes off into unconsciousness, the anaesthetist says to him, "Hey, by the way, I want to introduce Fred and Ethel. Fred and Ethel are going to be doing the operation today. They are going to be operating, on the particular body part that you need help with. They've never operated before. They're not actually qualified surgeons, but they're really enthusiastic. They have read a couple of books about it, and they feel very confident to be able to pull this surgery off." Well, if you're in that context, you are pulling all of the leads. You are rushing out of that theatre as soon as you possibly can, because you recognise you don't want any unqualified lunatic operating on your body. In a lot of ways, I think that's a great picture of what it's like for a young couple having kids, because suddenly they are unqualified. They didn't do a degree in childology, how to do family well. And yet it's the most important job on the planet. It's not something we're easily qualified to do, and yet it's the most important thing we can do.
Exactly.
And I want to chat to you about that. In a way, we operate as parents, for example, largely by
trial and error.
By trial and error. I hate to say that.
Yeah.
And so we've had to quite often get forgiveness from our kids along the journey, and vice versa. But let's talk about that. Your idea of flourishing families is you're using the agrarian or the agricultural idea. Can we dive into that a little bit, because you mentioned pruning, but let's talk about some of the other things that you think are really going to resonate in terms of how to do family well.
Yes. And relationships, of course. The first thing is, we're very tempted, especially in this social media world, to compare our lives with others, and it's sort of like the grass is greener. But, we're responsible for watering our own world. Okay, so when I think of our children, for example, and our partners and siblings and grandparents, whatever that looks like for you, for family, water to me speaks of bringing life into our relationships, and often that comes through building people up through our words of affirmation, words of life, and we're responsible for that. So that's a big call, but it's something that can be done. But anything good in God, it doesn't happen without sacrifice and without persistence. So usually the very thing that's needed in your family life is probably the thing that you are weakest in or that you don't want to do. But I often tell younger people that you can either play now, which is have what you want and pay later, or you can pay now and play later, so you can have the rewards later. And Proverbs 31 says that, our children will rise up and call us blessed. So we all want our children to rise up. But, the process of how that happens is quite, it is a process. And so I've lost my train of thought on that. However...
Well, we were talking about a good garden needs water.
Yeah, that's right.
And a good garden also needs to be pruned. You're much more comfortable in the garden than I am. My idea of a great garden is one that's kind of artificial grass. But for you, you actually do love getting out in the garden, and you also love to see healthy things growing. And it does my head in sometimes to see the way people destroy their home life for the sake of some other thing.
That's right. And Proverbs does say, you know, when it says woman and man, we've got to interchange that. But it does say, Proverbs 14 says that a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman tears it down with her own hands, which means over time you can actually destroy something that you really don't want to destroy through lack of knowledge or simply through selfishness. So, you know, a lawn needs to be trimmed, watered, and all that sort of stuff. You know, we have an amazing, 3-metre high hedge at the front of our home, and, you know, we've hardly ever pruned it. Okay, getting back to the pruning thing. And so we had friends over recently, and I said, take something off. And about 1 metre came off, and I'm struggling to believe that it will come back in spring. But the thing is, the secret of pruning is to do a little bit regularly. And to me, that speaks of a relationship that is willing to be shaped, and another relationship that's willing to lovingly shape another. And really, that is the discipleship thing of the family.
Yeah.
So pruning is a wonderful thing. So go out and prune before spring.
You also mentioned that a good garden needs not just watering, pruning, but also needs weeding.
Yes. Well, to me, when I think of weeding, I think of threats, okay? It's not that you want to be a helicopter parent to, make sure your child suffers no pain at all, but you do need to be aware, back to Psalm 1, of what threats your child or your husband, your wife, will face. Will they stand? Will they walk? Will they sit in a place that is going to bring them into risk? And we've had quite a few occasions where we've had to face that challenge and weed out, quite a significant threat in the lives of our family. And back to the pruning, a family isn't blessed for the sake of being blessed. I think it's sad when, occasionally you'll see a family who reaps all the benefits of, the godly wisdom they've received throughout the generations, and then they selfishly just forget that actually a family is designed to be a blessing in society and to bring others up and to help other people. So the blessing is for others. And that's God's heart, that your family would think of others and be an incredible blessing over time.
We talk about preparing kids for the real world, for example, as a parent. And, there's this trend at the moment, which is that we must insulate our kids from any hard things. But in the end, that can become very counterproductive, because kids don't build resistance or confidence in their identity or even in their worldview, in their belief system or their moral code or whatever. I mean, Ravi Zacharias, for example, talked about the fact that every person on the planet must resolve 4 key questions: the question of origin, the question of meaning, the question of morality, and the question of purpose. So those ideas of finding this core foundational direction and strength are very key. Can we talk about the fact, you're a school teacher as well as being a mum, you've had to watch kids from all walks of life do all sorts of journeys. We looked at that and talked about that kids in the real world have to be prepared for some things. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, so I guess in a family, when it boils down to it, really you're not looking at perfection, as we've said before. You're looking at learning opportunities for, you know, parents and children, because parents don't get out of this, you know, scot-free either. You know, we grow as we are facing challenges, you know, in society and in our own home. But the other thing about the garden is that a good vine, a healthy vine, say a wisteria, we have a wisteria at home, and left to itself, it grows through the hedge and actually sucks the life out of the hedge, which is another problem. But a good trellis, a good structure around that vine, that flourishing vine, helps it to grow and bring out beautiful flowers, etc., etc. So every family needs support around it, because every family has strengths that perhaps another family doesn't. And so we need other people around us to sort of bring strength into our world that we lack. Yeah. And that's what I love about church life, like that in our, as we all meet together, we can help one another, you know, and give one another advice and support. And that, especially in our youth and our kids, we have the delight and the privilege of having these amazing people help us parent our kids, and even on with our young adults, key people who will mentor them in financial matters and all sorts of things. So without structure, you can flourish all you want, but you might just flourish along the ground, or you might climb up someone else's tree. You know what I mean? It's sort of like we need structure and we need support, and I'm very thankful for the local church for doing that, you know, and that's who we are.
So going back to the idea of the kids' situation, the reality is that kids have to learn they won't be liked by everyone. They may not have happiness every day in their lives. They will face setbacks and tests. They will be unfairly treated. They will need to forgive lots of people. They will need to seek forgiveness. They will face financial challenges. They will have to learn to be self-disciplined. I think Jordan Peterson says, you know, the best thing you can do as a parent is to teach a kid to be the sort of person you would like. And, you know, that to me is a real challenge. Every kid will go through pain and loss, and they're also going to need their own faith. Let's maybe finish on that topic today. You're talking about the trellis, and as you say, we are blessed to be part of a church that values young people, doesn't see them as the church of tomorrow, but as the church of today. But we've often talked about this in our own leadership journey of saying the greatest thing we've done for our family is to love the church, to love God, love the church. And so we've seen that incredible fruit of that. Do you want to reflect on that as we draw to a close, on how to keep a family flourishing in all of the seasons of life?
Well, I love that little list there. I mean, and Jesus does say, you know, you will have trouble in the world. And I think if we could just all get that settled, then we'd have a more healthy outlook on life and God. He doesn't promise a trouble-free life. He promises peace in the middle of the storm. Yeah. And I think if we can help understand that ourselves, that there is no perfect church, there's no perfect husband, there's no perfect family, and that we must negotiate loss and injustice in a godly framework, which simply means that we need to learn to be good forgivers, really, which is really all two people who are married, is two people who forgive well. And if we can actually pass that baton on to our kids to help them know that there is a tomorrow that's bright, even though at this point in time it's really tough. And to me, that speaks of the mulch in the garden that protects the roots of that tree or plant from the blazing sun, which represents the troubles of life. It's only really through forgiveness and perseverance and all of those wonderful things that we can really keep our families safe and flourishing.
So good. Well, we want to thank you for joining us today, and you know, we're declaring blessing over every household, every family, because our expectancy is that God's intention for us is to flourish. He's not in any sense trying to rob us of all that life has. Jesus promised an abundant life. But in the middle of that, to recognize also that we have the capacity to come through things and to help our children come through things that are challenging. So God bless you. Thanks for joining us.